Wagwan, I am the DIY Yardie and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm doing brake rotor, front brake rotor and brake pads replacement. It's a '05 Cadillac Deville and the owner is complaining of the steering wheel and car itself shaking when braking at highway speeds. Okay, so this is the car. And these are the tools and the parts we're going to be needing for this job. Okay, you need a jack, your jack stand, your impact wrench, half-inch drive ratchet, which you can use that or the impact wrench, screwdriver, flat screwdriver, 15mm impact socket, and a 19mm impact socket. Okay. These are new brake pads and brake shims and new brake rotors. An additional tool that we're going to use is the brake caliper piston compression tool, which you can get at any automotive place. Not necessarily this brand, but something similar to this. Okay, so to begin, we're gonna block our wheels. I'm working on a slight incline. Block my wheel with my piece of log, yardman style, you know. So actually I block both back wheels and put my park brake on, or emergency brake, some people say. Next thing, I'm gonna jack the car, and on this car it has a subframe, which is that big piece of metal that you see right there. I'm going to jack the car on the subframe. I'm going to touch it in a second and show you what the subframe is. This is the subframe. Okay, so you jack the car on the subframe, and once I have it jacked up, I'm going to also put my jack stand under the subframe. Okay, that's to prevent the car from falling. Safety first. Okay, even though I don't plan to get under this car, you still want to make sure the car is secure. Okay, I also leave the jack in place, you know, so it's two points of contact holding the car up. Alright, so I'm going to pop my center cap out and I'm going to remove the wheel. That's my 19mm impact socket. Some other issues that can cause shimmying and shaking in your front end is, you know, worn front end parts, tie rod end, control arm, lower ball joint, but I've already checked all of that stuff. Everything is nice and tight. Okay, so got the wheel off. So now I'm going to remove the caliper. That's a 15mm. Now, when we remove the caliper bolts, you have to pay attention to the caliper bolts because one bolt is just all metal. The bottom bolt is all metal, while the top bolt is all metal, but it has a rubber bushing attached to it. If you look at the top bolt, when I remove it, see that rubber bushing at the end. Okay, so that's the top caliper bolt. And next, we're gonna remove the caliper, which isn't always as easy like that. So you have to relieve, some of the pressure from the caliper. So take a screwdriver. Preferably you get a bigger screwdriver, and you pry on the rotor and then against the caliper a little bit, not much, just to relieve the pressure so the caliper comes off easier. Alright, just slide it off just like that. Okay, now then you start with the brake pads. These pads still had some life left in them, but being that you're doing a brand new rotor, you want to do brand new brake pads also. Alright. And this next piece is called the caliper bracket. So there are two bolts holding the caliper bracket. I'm going to remove those also. And those are both 15 millimeters also. So it's not a lot of tools really needed for this job. It's a pretty easy job. That's the top, and now the bottom one. Oh, that's the caliper bracket. I have that out the way. And usually when I do this job, I secure the caliper to the struts, which I'm going to show you. Use a bungee cord or whatever you have, a wire hanger or whatever. Secure it, for safety reasons. You don't have it flopping around and break the brake hose. Okay. So hold the rotor off. And we're going to remove the old shims. Those are the brake shims from the caliper bracket. I'm going to put the new shims on. We pop the old ones off. Pretty easy. Snap them off. And the new ones just snap in place, just like the old ones came off. Just make sure it's, on there evenly, top and bottom. Those are so that the new brake pads, slide or move freely in place when you reassemble it back onto the car. So these new rotors, they come with like a oil, substance on it, and that's to keep the rotors from rusting. Okay, so I usually use a little bit of alcohol on that piece of cloth and wipe them down clean to get the oil off of it, because you don't want to put it on a car with the oil. You'll be slipping and sliding, you won't have any brakes. So make sure you clean up those rotors real nice. Not all rotors will have oil. They're, depending on the type of rotors you get. Some rotors come with the oil and some don't. They have like a painted surface. Some of them do have a painted surface that once you install it onto the car, it's dry, and as you drive, that painted surface wears away. So those type of rotors, you don't have to worry about cleaning oil because there's no oil there. Only these type, which is, you can see it's a shiny type of material. It's not painted. Okay, so put the new rotor in place. Working with one hand and holding the camera with the other hand, so it's a little awkward here. So everything is going back the reverse of how we took it apart. Okay, that's a brake caliper bracket. Remember, 2 bolts, top and bottom. And this is a electric impact, so it's not, you know, super tight. I'm just making sure that it's on there pretty good. It's not as strong as air impact. So next, I'm going to pull the piston down, pull the caliper down, and push the piston in. Because if you don't push the piston in on the caliper, you won't be able to install the new brakes. So this is where the caliper piston tools comes in. So that piston there has to be pushed back in. Whenever you apply brakes when you're driving, that piston is what pushes against the brake pads to stop the car, grabbing the rotor. So put that in place and you tighten down on it, and that will push the piston back in. But what you want to do also is remember to watch your that's your brake, that's the reservoir for the brake fluid. You know, sometimes some people, you know, top it off with brake fluid when it's not really supposed to be topped off. So when you go to push the piston back in, you'll have brake fluid coming out the top of the reservoir. In some cases, not always. Okay, so we are lucky it didn't happen in this case. So you turn the tool until you feel it, you know, stop, then you loosen it up. Should be good to go from there. Okay, so I'm going to put my new brake pads in. That's the inner. It plays pretty good, and the outer. Then put the caliper in place. And with this car, it has a little rubber bushings that you have to make sure they're lined up in the right line. And make sure they're aligned, because it'll give you a little bit of a hard time to get the caliper bolts back in. I usually put a little grease on the caliper bolts before I put them back in. Make sure they're nice and lubricated. And then I go ahead and tighten them up. And the same thing I do on this side is the exact same thing I'll do to the opposite side. So I don't really need to show you, you know, being that you're just doing the same thing on the other side. Put our wheel back in place, tighten it up. Glue is tight. Put your center cap back in place. And the last thing you do before you jack the car down is you want to pump the brakes. Now, I usually do 3 to 4 pumps, not all the way to the floor on the first 2, but you do that to make sure you know your brake pedal is back up and good. Every time you change the brakes on each wheel, you want to do that. That's it, and job done.